When Johnny Depp steps onto the set of Voices in Debate, the audience braces for another deep, thoughtful conversation. But James Holloway isn't here for thoughtfulness, he's here for confrontation. Known for breaking his guests down with sharp provocations, Holloway sees Johnny's silver cross necklace as an opportunity, a symbol to dissect, a belief to challenge. Yet, as Johnny settles into his seat, something shifts. The power dynamic feels certain. Holloway leans in, ready to strike, but what he doesn't know is that by the end of this interview it won't be Johnny struggling for words, it will be him, and the world will be watching. The studio buzzed with energy. Bright lights illuminated the sleek, modern stage, adorned with LED panels that flickered in shades of blue and gold, reflecting the sophisticated identity of the show. The audience murmured in anticipation, eager for what was to come. Voices in Debate was a renowned talk show, celebrated for its sharp approach and its host, a man whose reputation for challenging his guests made him both fascinating and intimidating. At the center of the stage, James Holloway adjusted his tie with a subtle smile. Tall, with carefully styled silver hair and piercing eyes, he was a master of provocation. His specialty was pushing his guests beyond their comfort zones, drawing out truths they might have preferred to leave hidden. The show's opening theme played through the speakers, and applause erupted throughout the studio. The camera zoomed in on Holloway as he spread his arms in a practiced, theatrical gesture. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Voices in Debate." His voice was rich with confidence, commanding the space effortlessly. "This is the show where we explore truths, deconstruct narratives, and put great minds to the test." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Each week, Voices in Debate brought in influential figures, politicians, intellectuals, and celebrities, and challenged them in conversations that often made headlines the next day. But tonight's guest carried a special weight. He wasn't a controversial politician or a scandal-ridden star. He was an icon, beloved, respected, yet shrouded in mystery. Holloway let the suspense linger before continuing. "Our guest tonight is one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, a legendary actor admired for his humility and humanity, yet someone who remains intriguingly private. He rarely shares more than necessary, but tonight we aim to go beyond the surface. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Depp." The audience erupted in applause. Some people even rose to their feet in admiration. The camera shifted to the side of the stage as a dark curtain slowly parted. Johnny emerged with his signature, composed stride and an air of quiet presence. Dressed in a sleek black suit without a tie, his shoulder-length hair framed his face, and against the darkness of his attire, a silver cross necklace gleamed under the studio lights. He acknowledged the audience with a small, reserved smile before taking a seat opposite Holloway. He crossed his legs in a relaxed posture, seemingly unfazed by the weight of expectation that filled the room. "Johnny Depp," Holloway said, leaning slightly forward, his gaze sharp and attentive, "it's a pleasure to have you here." "The pleasure is mine, James," Johnny replied, his voice calm yet steady. The host studied his guest for a brief moment, like a chess player contemplating his first move. "You have a reputation for being one of the nicest guys in Hollywood, a real enigma, always kind, always discreet, never caught up in scams. But honestly, Johnny, I believe there's much more to you than people realize." Johnny gave a small, knowing smile, tilting his head slightly. "I think we all have more layers than we show the world." "No doubt," Holloway agreed, narrowing his eyes slightly. "And that's exactly what we're here to explore." A brief pause followed, calculated, deliberate, then Holloway's gaze flicked subtly to the silver cross resting against Johnny's chest. "Now, tell me," he gestured lightly toward the necklace, "you've never been particularly outspoken about religion or faith, but here you are wearing a very visible Christian symbol." Johnny's expression remained serene, though his fingers instinctively brushed against the cross, a conscious, unconscious habit. The studio lights flickered softly as the show returned from the commercial break. The audience, still murmuring in anticipation, was eager for what would come next. The Voices in Debate logo glowed behind the stage, while James Holloway settled into his seat, wearing a smug smile and the piercing gaze of a man who believed he was in control. This was his favorite part, the moment he dismantled his guests, stripped away their defenses, and forced them into uncomfortable territory. "All right, we're back," he announced, twirling a pen between his fingers in an almost dismissive manner. Then his eyes locked onto Johnny Depp like a predator studying its prey. "Before the break, I asked you a simple question, Johnny. what does that necklace mean to you? The audience fell into silence. Some leaned forward in their seats, eager to see how Johnny would handle the pressure. Johnny's fingers brushed against the silver cross, rolling it gently between them. His expression was calm, his demeanor unreadable. This necklace, he glanced at it as if weighing his words carefully, has personal meaning to me. Holloway arched a brow, then let out a short, scoffing laugh. Personal, he echoed mockingly. Oh, come on, Johnny, you're a public figure. Everything you wear, everything you display, sends a message. Johnny remained composed, but Holloway could sense the tension brewing beneath his stillness. The host leaned forward slightly, his tone dripping with condescension, and let's be real here. Holloway gestured toward the cross. It's 2025, the world has changed, people have changed, and yet here you are. He pointed directly at the necklace. Wearing an archaic symbol. The provocation was blatant. The audience stiffened, sensing the sharpness in his words. Johnny's gaze remained steady. Archaic? Holloway smirked deliberately, twisting the knife deeper. Yes, archaic, religion, faith, belief in unseen forces. He waved his hand dismissively. I'm not a religious man, Johnny. I believe in reason, in progress, and frankly, I find it surprising that someone like you, modern, progressive, intelligent, would still cling to something so outdated. He chuckled softly, shaking his head, as if Johnny were a child who hadn't yet outgrown fairy tales. Look, I get it. When simple-minded people without access to knowledge, hold on to faith. But you, Holloway raised a brow, eyes gleaming with superiority, you've traveled the world, you've seen different cultures. I expected better. It was an insult disguised as intellectual superiority. Some in the audience laughed nervously at Holloway's audacity, while others seemed uncomfortable. Johnny, however, did not react. He didn't flinch, didn't avert his gaze, didn't shrink under the weight of Holloway's words. He simply looked at the host with a quiet, unshaken intensity, then at last he spoke. Interesting, James, his voice was steady, carrying an undertone of quiet strength. You talk as if faith and intelligence are mutually exclusive. Holloway snorted, shaking his head. Oh, come on, Johnny, let's be honest here. How many wars have been fought in the name of that cross you're wearing? How many people have been persecuted, killed, condemned because of that symbol? Johnny ran his thumb over the pendant, his gaze steady. Do you want to debate history, or do you want to debate my necklace? The audience reacted audibly, and an impressed "who" rippled through the crowd. Holloway's eyes narrowed slightly. He wasn't used to being called out so directly. He forced a chuckle, but his fingers tensed slightly on the armrest of his chair. Fair enough, his tone was sharper now. Let me make it simpler then. Are you wearing that cross as a statement, as a declaration to the world? It was a trap. If Johnny said yes, Holloway could accuse him of pushing a religious agenda. If he said no, he would seem hypocritical for displaying a symbol without standing by it. But once again, Johnny did not fall for it. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying the host, then he spoke. Are you wearing that expensive watch on your wrist as a statement, James, as a declaration to the world? A pause, a second too long, and the audience laughed. Johnny had flipped the conversation effortlessly. Holloway's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. The show host was no stranger to heated debates, but this was different. Johnny wasn't getting defensive, he wasn't reacting with frustration or aggression, he was turning Holloway's own tactics against him, and the audience was starting to notice. But Holloway wasn't about to let control slip away. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to sound dangerous. All right, Johnny, let's be blunt. In a world of science, evolution, and technology, do you really believe that symbol on your chest still has a place? The provocation was no longer subtle, it was a direct challenge. The audience held its breath. Johnny's lips parted, ready to respond, and just as he was about to speak, the show's theme music played. A commercial break. Holloway grinned triumphantly, turning to the camera. We'll be right back, folks, but trust me, this conversation is far from over. The show's theme music played again, and the studio was illuminated with a subtle light shift as the show returned from its commercial break. James Holloway adjusted his tie and clasped his hands together, wearing a smug smile. He believed he had backed Johnny into a corner. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone who thought they had already won the debate. He turned to the camera, making sure to hold his audience. Before the break, we left a question in the air. one that I think we all want answered. In a world of science, technology, and evolution, does that symbol still have a place? He turned to Johnny, eyes sharp, waiting for hesitation, waiting for him to stumble. But Johnny Depp did not hesitate. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, calm, steady, with an almost unreadable glint in his eyes. "James, if you don't mind, may I ask you a question?" Holloway blinked, caught off guard by the sudden role reversal. "Oh, by all means," he grinned, though there was a hint of mockery in his tone. Johnny studied him for a moment, then spoke. "What do you believe evolution is?" Holloway squinted slightly, as if trying to detect a trap. "Oh, come on, Johnny, evolution is progress. It's growth. It's about leaving behind outdated beliefs and advancing toward a world driven by reason." Johnny nodded slowly, as if considering the answer. "So to you, evolving means abandoning anything that can't be measured in a lab?" Holloway chuckled dryly. "Well, if something can't be proven, then it's just an idea, right?" Johnny held his gaze, patient but unshakable. And then, with a touch of calm conviction, he said, "What about love? Can you measure love, James?" The audience murmured. A few people crossed their arms, intrigued by the turn in conversation. Holloway scoffed, but there was a slight edge of nervousness now. "I'm not sure I follow." His voice remained steady. "Does love exist?" Holloway exhaled sharply. "Of course it does, but have you ever scientifically proven it? Have you ever held love in your hands, placed it under a microscope?" The silence in the studio was deafening. Holloway's expression shifted for the briefest moment. He realized where Johnny was leading him. "Oh, no, Holloway waved a hand, laughing without humor. "You are not going to compare religion to love. I'm not comparing them." Johnny's eyes held firm. "I'm asking you, if something can't be scientifically proven, does that mean it has no value?" The audience held its breath. Holloway blinked momentarily, thrown off course. Johnny did not raise his voice, he did not change his expression, but his words carried a weight that filled the studio. "James, you talk about faith as if it's a chain that binds people, but what if, for some, it's a bridge? What if, for me, this cross is not about control but about freedom?" Holloway opened his mouth to counter, but Johnny continued before he could interrupt. "You brought up wars, persecution. Yes, religion has been misused, twisted into something harmful by people in power. But that doesn't erase the fact that, for millions, it has also been a refuge, a light in the darkness. I wear this cross not as a statement of superiority or control, but as a reminder." Holloway's lips pressed into a thin line. Johnny looked directly at him, a reminder of humility, of compassion, a reminder that the world does not revolve around me. The silence stretched, then Johnny tilted his head slightly. "What about you, James?" Holloway frowned. "What about me?" Johnny's voice remained soft, yet the question hit with the force of a hammer. "Do you believe in anything greater than yourself?" The audience grew even quieter. The question landed like a punch. Holloway tensed just slightly, enough for the cameras to catch it. He inhaled, composing himself. "We're not here to talk about me," he managed. Johnny offered a small, knowing smile. "Maybe we should." His eyes darkened. "James," he leaned back in his chair, "because when someone reacts with such hostility toward a symbol, it usually means there's something about it that unsettles them." Holloway's jaw clenched for the first time that night. James Holloway was on the defensive, and the audience noticed. The studio was silent, entirely absorbed in the verbal battle unfolding before them. James Holloway, once the commanding force of every conversation, now sat across from Johnny Depp, visibly outmaneuvered for the first time in his career. He had nothing to say, and the audience felt it. A slow realization spread through the room. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a shift. Johnny remained still, composed, his presence steady like an anchor in the middle of a storm. Then a sound broke through the silence. A soft, at first, a single clap, then another, and then an eruption of applause. The audience rose to their feet in an unexpected standing ovation, shaking the studio. Johnny's words had resonated. His calmness, his ability to navigate every provocation, had left them speechless. James Holloway, still seated, still reeling, glanced toward the cameras. He could see the headlines forming in real time. He had lost, and he knew it. Holloway forced a thin smile, his ego fighting to maintain some semblance of control. "Well, Johnny," he said, clearing his throat, "I have to admit, I didn't expect this conversation to go in this direction. Johnny's eyes remained calm, understanding but not forgiving. Conversations have a way of revealing more than we plan. James Holloway's fingers tapped against his chair, a nervous tick that said it all. He chuckled lightly, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "I suppose this is the part where I thank you for your insights and your time." Johnny nodded. "It's been a pleasure," he said. And the way he said it, genuine yet firm, made it clear this wasn't a victory Johnny had sought, but it was a victory nonetheless. The world was watching. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips from the conversation flooded social media. Johnny Depp's name dominated the trending lists, memes, reaction videos, and threads analyzing every moment of the debate spread like wildfire. But beyond the usual internet buzz, something felt different this time. This wasn't just another viral moment, it was a shift in perception. James Holloway sat alone in his dressing room, watching the aftermath unfold. The interview was everywhere, news outlets dissected it, talk shows replayed clips, and commentators weighed in. Some called it the night Holloway met his match, others labeled it the most important conversation of the year. Holloway clenched his jaw as he scrolled through Twitter. #JohnnyWins was the top trend. Critics, celebrities, and even public figures were praising Johnny's calm, unwavering responses. But the worst part was not just that Johnny had stood his ground, it was that Holloway had been exposed. His usual tactics, the sharp provocations, the calculated condescension, the relentless need to corner his guests, had failed, and everyone saw it for the first time in his career. James Holloway was not the one controlling the conversation, and he hated it. Meanwhile, Johnny Depp left the studio without a word, no grand victory speeches, no gloating, no interviews. He simply nodded to the crew, shook a few hands, and walked away. Reporters swarmed outside, microphones raised, shouting questions. "Johnny, how do you feel about the interview? Do you think Holloway was unfair? What message were you trying to send?" Johnny didn't answer. Instead, he smiled softly, got into a car, and disappeared into the night. His silence spoke louder than any response could. Days later, Johnny finally broke his silence with a single post on social media. No long statements, no explanations, just a simple message: we don't have to agree to respect each other. We don't have to believe the same things to walk the same path. The post exploded. It wasn't about religion, it wasn't about winning, it was about understanding. And that was why Johnny had won. Because in the end, it wasn't about the argument, it was about the conversation. The next morning, as dawn painted the skyline with soft hues of pink and gold, the world was still buzzing with the previous night's unforgettable debate. Social media was alight with conversations, and the #JohnnyWins was trending, capturing the admiration of thousands. Critics and commentators alike were abuzz with their analyses, noting that the conversation had transcended mere television drama and entered the realm of cultural discourse. It wasn't just about a debate, it was about challenging long-held assumptions and inviting viewers to see beyond the surface of polarizing issues. In a quiet corner of downtown, Johnny sat in a modest cafe, far removed from the glare of the media spotlight. He sipped his coffee slowly, reflecting on the events as he casually flipped through a newspaper filled with glowing commentaries and skeptical editorials. It was in this humble setting that a familiar face, a longtime friend from his early film days, joined him at the table. "Did you see how everything changed last night?" his friend asked softly, pride and relief mingling in his voice. Johnny simply smiled and replied that real strength lay in remaining true to oneself, regardless of the pressure to conform to popular opinion. Meanwhile, inside a dimly lit room at the studio, James Holloway sat alone, replaying every moment of the interview. The aggressive questions and sharp retorts echoed in his mind as he tried to understand where his carefully crafted arguments had fallen short. For the first time, he questioned whether his method of provocation was truly effective in fostering genuine understanding. Holloway's internal dialogue shifted from self-assurance to a hesitant recognition. Perhaps his approach was too forceful, too dismissive of the nuanced interplay between science and spirituality. This realization, bitter as it was, began to plant a seed of transformation in him. Back on the airwaves, several hours later, a special edition of Voices in Debate aired, a program entirely dedicated to dissecting the previous night's events. Panels of experts, ranging from sociologists to theologians, debated the significance of Johnny's calm yet incisive responses. They argued that while facts and data were vital, the human heart required empathy and understanding, qualities that cannot be measured by any scientific instrument. Some pointed out that Johnny had not only defended his beliefs but had also posed questions that compelled his opponent to confront the deeper implications of his own views. Is it not possible, one analyst remarked, that our inability to measure love or faith does not diminish their value, but rather speaks to their profound impact on our lives? In living rooms and quiet offices across the nation, people began to re-examine their own convictions. Families discussed over dinner whether progress meant abandoning old beliefs entirely or refining them to fit a modern context. Coffee shop conversations turned philosophical as strangers shared personal stories of hope and resilience. The debate had ignited an introspection that went far beyond television screens. It had stirred a collective yearning for a more balanced understanding of life's complexities. Later that evening, as the city settled into a contemplative calm, Johnny found himself at a quiet rooftop overlooking the bustling streets below. He took a moment to appreciate the night sky, its darkness punctuated by distant stars, each a silent reminder of the mystery that fuels human curiosity. He recalled his own words from the debate, the idea that faith, like fire, could warm a home or burn it down, depending on how it was harnessed. For Johnny, the cross was not a symbol of submission or control but a beacon of personal freedom, a reminder of both vulnerability and strength. At the same time, news outlets began speculating about James Holloway's future. Was this defeat a temporary setback, or had the debate signaled a turning point in his career? Even amidst the criticism, Holloway's team vowed to learn from the encounter, promising a more balanced and open approach in future shows. For many, the conversation had been a wake-up call, a demonstration that in an age dominated by technology and information, the intangible qualities of empathy, humility, and love still held the power to transform lives. Thus, the night's events lingered in public memory, a catalyst for discussions that would continue long into the future. The debate was not just an isolated moment of televised conflict. It had become a mirror reflecting the diverse and evolving perspectives of a society in search of deeper meaning.